All right. Well, I think we'll probably start the presentation. And again, if as people come in, if we'll just look to make sure they have mics and audio turned off, that would be great. For those who are coming in, just want to let you know that we are recording this presentation. Okay, so good morning. I am Lisa Krauser, and on behalf of the Greyhound Options Board, I'd like to welcome everybody to our very first Learn and Greet. I'd also like to introduce a few people. Sarah Brandt is our host, and she's handling most of the technical and Zoom functions for us, and we're very grateful for that. And we also have Karen St. Ange, who is a co-host and will and is also a board member. So we are really happy to be able to hold these events free of charge. Just want people to know that if you'd like to support our mission and activities, we always welcome donations, and we make it pretty easy to do on our website. So before I introduce our speaker, I want to quickly review the format for this morning's meeting. So our presenter is going to talk for about 45 minutes. People are welcome to type questions into the chat box at any time. So if you look at probably the bottom of the screen, you'll see chat. And if you click on that, you can just type in your questions. If the question is relative to something being addressed, one of the hosts will ask the question. Look, there's somebody still trying to get in. Otherwise, we are leaving time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, and we'll get to as many of the questions as we can at that point. Following the formal presentation, we're going to have separate breakout rooms. So you'll have an opportunity to join the speakers breakout room if you want to continue to ask questions about the presentation. Otherwise, we'll have a separate breakout room where members who just want to chat with friends and about greyhounds generally can join. And that will be hosted by Geo's own Tony Bryant. So now, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can introduce Kim McCord, who is going to be today's presenter. You'll then be able to tell us a little bit more about your background and then get right into the presentation about challenging behaviors that we sometimes all experience with our greys.
So a little about myself. My husband and I adopted our first greyhound, Zeke, back in 1998. And since then, we welcomed a total of 4 greyhounds to our family and over 30 greyhound fosters to our household here in Granby, Connecticut. We have not had our own greyhound in our house since our last passed in 2018. So we had 20 solid years of greyhound adoption in the McCord household. And in
I just muted mine, so I can see the screen.
So around 2005, 2006, I decided that I wanted to learn more about dog training. So I took a course that was a year-long course in dog training and behavior. It was an online course, and then I did an apprenticeship down at the Humane Society in Connecticut. And beyond that, I have really just sort of moonlighted a little bit. The only reason I wanted to learn about dog behavior was to help people. So it was not a primary career. I dabbled in it here and there, and now I am exclusively just doing it on a volunteer basis. I share my knowledge with friends, with family, and of course with Greyhound Options, which is near and dear to my heart. I was on the board for many years. I am still a foster and a placement rep. So when Lisa broached the subject of these learning greets, I thought, what a wonderful idea, and I am happy to participate in this first learning greet. So that's enough about me. I will give you a little bit of information just on how I roll. I tend to tell stories. I tend to be a pretty good talker. I'm sure most of you who know me would agree that I don't have any problem talking. Lisa and our co-hosts are going to be kind of hanging out in the background. They're going to be checking the chat feature. I'm really going to be focused just on trying to stay on track and not ramble and babble too much. And I'm going to try to hold my portion of the talking to, about that 45-minute point. And then we will have about 15 minutes to answer questions. I'll give you guys some resources toward the end of the presentation if you wanted to learn more. So here I go, just chatting away. So I could go on and on just in general about dog behavior. But since we are all focused on greyhounds and specifically X-racing greyhounds, I'm going to try to pinpoint the most common areas of behavior specific to sight hounds, to X-racers, etc. There are some areas that absolutely overlap. Greyhounds are dogs. Other breeds of dogs share some of the same issues that greyhounds do, but really greyhounds are a unique dog in that they have a very unique background, especially if they are X-racers. They've lived on a breeding farm. Their puppyhood is very different than all other dog breeds. They then are at a track, which has a very different routine than any other breed of dog. So there are some of those background issues that make greyhounds unique. The other thing about most of our pet greyhounds that make them unique is that they don't come to us as 8-week-old or 10-week-old puppies most of the time. They come to us as adult dogs who have been trained to do certain things. Very often they come to us at 2 years old, 3 years old, sometimes much older. So that's sort of what I'm going to try to stick to. Some of the information I'm going to give you is absolutely about all dogs. So let me back up and just express the first bulleted item, and that's regarding all dog behaviors being natural and rewarding. So when we talk about behaviors, we're generally pinpointing dog behaviors that human beings aren't real appreciative of. But we have to recognize that dogs are just doing what dogs do. Sometimes their behavior is very primal, very instinctive, but in all cases, whatever the dog is doing is rewarding to the dog. A little bit about my beliefs in dog training and how we should treat our dogs. And that's across the board, both Greyhounds and any other breed of dog, is that we need to only use positive reinforcement with our dogs. I do not believe in ever striking a dog, ever harming a dog in any way. My belief is that we adopt dogs, we ask dogs to join our family because we love dogs and we want to care for them. And we have a very serious responsibility that we are undertaking when we accept a dog into our family. So that when I learned about training, I specifically picked a program that believes in positive reinforcement-based training and behavior modification. With Greyhounds specifically, they, as we all know and probably appreciate, is that Greyhounds tend to be incredibly sensitive dogs. They, based on whether it's their background or their temperament, if you make a sudden movement toward them, they very often will shy away. They will flinch as if you're going to strike them. And genuinely a firm no with a particular firm tone of voice is often enough to correct whatever behavior it is that you catch them in the act of. So I want to make that very, very clear. I do not believe in ever striking a dog. So some behaviors are instinct-based. So with regard to Greyhounds, obviously they are sight hounds. That is something we are never going to change about a Greyhound. They have a particularly high prey drive. And these are dogs that have been trained, especially if they are ex-racers, which most of them are, they have been trained to chase small moving objects, little fuzzy critters. So if we are trying to change the behavior that has to do with that prey drive and that instinct, it can be very difficult and in some cases impossible to change. Another thing I want to point out is that every dog is unique and every home, every family, every circumstance that a dog is coming into is unique and is special. So when I talk to my training clients, I tell them what is important to you may not be important to somebody else. You have to prioritize what you want to work on. Some people have absolutely no problem with their dogs sleeping in bed with them. They have no problem with their dog on the furniture or on the couch. They have no problem if their dog digs holes all over their beautiful landscaped backyard. Other people are very strict and are very firm about certain boundaries. And that is your decision to make. When you adopt a dog into your household, you are the one who is deciding, what are we going to work on? What are we not? What can we live with? You also know what your dog is prone to do. What are unique behaviors of your dog or dogs? And the last thing I want to mention in this slide is that many dogs, and Greyhounds included, will engage in behaviors that are based on fear, based on trauma, based on experiences that have created a fear and a primal reaction to a particular fear. Those types of behaviors can only be addressed with desensitizing and counter conditioning of that particular behavior. A rule of thumb with regard to any dog training, and especially fear-based training, is that food overcomes fear. I am a big proponent of rewarding with food for dogs that are food motivated, which most are. There are a very small percentage of dogs that do not. They are very picky eaters. They don't much care for a lot of foods, but typically you can find something that is irresistible to most dogs. And I think greyhounds in general don't tend to be dogs that won't work for a little piece of chicken. So if your dog is not particularly interested in a milk bone or a little piece of kibble or working for baby carrots, then you got to up the ante and you got to pull out some cooked chicken. And when I talk to people about training treats and rewards when it comes to food, I will tell them that a grade A reward when it comes to food is meat. And it also, luckily, is the most inexpensive, believe it or not. So a lot of people will go out and they will buy very fancy training treats, and they'll pay $10 a pound for a little pouch of some kind of yummy training treat that who knows what's in it. And what I tend to offer is go to the supermarket, buy some uncooked plain chicken. You could even be fancy and get organic chicken if you'd like, and cook it up, cut it into little pea-sized bits and freeze it, and you will have training treats and training rewards for your dog whenever you need them. I don't know what chicken runs for these days, but even if it's $4 a pound, it's going to be a lot less than what you would pay for a commercial training treat. I tend to steer clear of cheese. Dairy tends to be a no-no with dogs, even if they love cheese. So just stick to some kind of chicken if you really need to reward your dog with a treat. Dogs that are incredibly food motivated, you can use their kibble. You can use bits of biscuit as reward. Just keep in mind, you don't want an overweight greyhound. So if you are using food as a reward, you'll probably want to cut back on their meals a little bit so that they don't develop a weight problem. This is just, I'm going to run through this really, really quickly. You can read it as well as I can say it. These are my own golden rules of dog training. There are others, but these are the ones that I really focus in on. Commitment. Anytime that you are either just doing basic dog training, or if you are working on some pretty serious behavior modification, you need to be committed to it. Patience. Training takes time, and it truly never ends. So if you have a dog that you are lucky enough to have as a member of your family for 12 to 14 years, you are going to be training that dog, reinforcing those behaviors, maintaining that training and those behaviors for the rest of that dog's life. So be patient when you are trying to train a new behavior or modify a behavior. It's not going to happen overnight. It is not anything that you can hire a trainer to come in and wave a magic wand and fix your dog, right? So be patient. Positive reinforcement. I already talked about my beliefs with regard to your relationship with your dog. There's a reason why you adopted a dog. So you need to teach love and tolerance and really focus on the positive part of having a dog in your family. Leadership. Leadership is something that has been talked a lot about with regard to certain trainers that are very high profile trainers. I believe that leadership is important, but the reality is that most dogs that we have as pets, and especially greyhounds, tend to be not dominant, not aggressive dogs, where leadership and alpha and pack order types of training are most important are with the small percentage of dogs that want to vie for the alpha position in a pack, that tend to have dominance and aggression issues. That is a very small percentage of dogs. So I don't want people putting too much time into that leadership component, but there are times when we absolutely should try to instill that leadership into the framework of our family dynamic. Exercise. Can't say enough about exercise. The old adage, a tired dog is a good dog, is absolutely true. Management. Management is a part of the entire process of dog training, the relationship of having a dog in our house. Management is a critical component of that, and I will talk a lot about management later in the presentation, and I will give a lot of examples of management that we already are doing every day and just may not realize that it's called management. Consistency, so important, especially when there are multiple humans living in the household. It is never a good situation where you have one person who is kind of creating a routine and rules and has that level of commitment and patience and is doing everything right. Doesn't make any difference if you have 3 or 4 other family members in the household who are not doing the same thing. So everybody has to be a united front when it comes to the behavior of a dog and the training of a dog. Fun. Can't capitalize that word enough. Having a dog should be fun. It is fun. It is a wonderful, wonderful part of my life, and it should be a wonderful part of your life. And I think all of us who are on this meeting right now would agree that their greyhound and their dogs are a huge joy to them. So your training and your life with your dog, it should be fun and it should be joyful. And then the last golden rule is maintenance. That goes back to, this is for the life of your dog. There are behaviors that will sort of wax and wane over the years. Some things will drop off completely and problem behaviors will just go away. Others, you're going to have to keep working on it and maintaining. As new dogs come into the household, as circumstances change, you're going to need to change some things up a little bit, and you might have to tweak some things over the years. So, most common in Greyhound. Now, again, these are things that I specifically have selected for today. I could go on and on about a bunch of things, but the issues that I have picked are in no particular order. Separation anxiety, other types of anxiety and fear, housebreaking issues, chewing and counter surfing, resource guarding, and prey drive and small animal aggression. So I'm going to actually talk about the prey drive, small animal aggression a little bit first, just because that one is, as I already mentioned, incredibly difficult to deal with. In most cases, you are not going to train that out of your dog. And in most cases, you need to focus primarily on management. So what I mean by management, specifically with regard to prey drive and the safety of small animals when there is a greyhound in the house, is you're going to have those small animals, whether it's a cat, whether it's guinea pigs, you name it, that their safety has to be a priority. So small animals need to be kept separate from your greyhound if there is any question at all as to the temperament of your greyhound. When we do introduce small animals to greyhounds and vice versa, it needs to be done in the safest of ways. So again, management. We're using a leash on our greyhound. We're using a muzzle on our greyhound. So if the greyhound were to lunge at the small animal, it's not going to be able to harm it. And it takes time. So we can use baby gates. We can have the smaller animals in a cage, in a separate room, behind all kinds of barriers. And you need to be observing the behavior of the greyhound at all times to see what their interest level is in the animal. So fortunately, Greyhound Options has an amazing network of foster families. They test all of the greyhounds that come through the pipeline, and they really have a very good idea, even from having the dog in just foster care for a few weeks, what level of prey drive and what level of interest those particular dogs will have. In my experience, about 50% of greyhounds tend to be okay with small animals, or at least workable with small animals in the right circumstances. As we've all been told, outdoors, all bets are off. Even a greyhound who cuddles up and sleeps with a favorite kitty cat inside the house, if it goes outside and it sees a neighbor's cat running through the yard, if it sees a squirrel, a bunny rabbit, you name it, all bets are off. So, and again, that's an instinctive based drive that you're not going to do much about. So now on to, I'm going to go back up to the top and talk a little bit about separation anxiety, because I think that is another one that is very, very common in greyhounds. My very first greyhound, Zeke, back in '98, when we adopted him, is a perfect example. He had horrible, horrible separation anxiety when we first got him. He could not be crated, would not be crated. I was lucky enough to be able to bring him to work with me every single day. We took him in the car with us everywhere we went. We vacationed with him. He was rarely away from us. But he did a lot of damage and destruction when we did need to leave him. And that is typically what happens with a greyhound who is going through separation anxiety. You're going to see chewing, especially around doors and windows. You're going to have vocalizations. You're going to have screaming, crying, barking. drooling, frantic carrying on of that poor dog, who just wants to be with you. In the case of separation anxiety, it takes a long time to counter condition. And that is something that I would think a lot of Greyhound options, placement reps and foster families have dealt with, and would be amazing experts to give advice. The advice to us back in 1998 when we were dealing with it was get another Greyhound, which we did. 4 months after we adopted Zeke, we adopted Sassy, and Zeke was completely cured. Is that going to work in every situation? No. Can everybody take on a second Greyhound? No. So that was certainly the easiest solution to our problem. There are other tricks and other tools that can be used, but bottom line, the dog has to be left for very, very small intervals that gradually get longer and longer and longer. It has to be a positive experience for the dog when they are left alone. So music playing, television on, pleasant atmosphere, all very, very important. A peanut butter stuffed Kong has never been rejected by any Greyhound or dog that I know. So those are the types of tools that we can use to desensitize the dog when they are feeling that kind of anxiety. When it comes to severe anxiety, whether it's separation anxiety or another type of anxiety, some dogs will need to be medicated. There are some dogs, just like humans, that have such levels of anxiety that it becomes a physiological issue. And the only way that it can be tackled is through the help of a veterinarian and some good anxiety medication. So those types of discussions should be had with your vet, should be had with your friends who have Greyhounds, who maybe have experienced separation anxiety with their dog. Housebreaking issues. This is another one that I suspect some people on here have experienced. Housebreaking issues obviously can be very frustrating. I have heard countless stories of dogs that had no housebreaking issues while in foster care and then have gone into a home as a possible adoption and have started having housebreaking issues. There are all kinds of reasons why housebreaking breaks down. With regard to Greyhounds specifically, these are dogs who have lived in a kennel environment for a lot of their young lives. Most dogs make a really good transition from being crate trained and not soiling in their den or in their crate to moving into a home and realizing, oh, I'm not supposed to do my business in the living room. I go out to do that. Other dogs, it's a little bit trickier. Bottom line, anybody who is transitioning a dog to holding their bodily functions until they are outside in an appropriate area, you need to do it with kindness, with patience, and never with punishment. So what I have always tended to do when it comes to housebreaking is you do not, you may correct a dog if you catch them in the act, So male dogs tend to like to mark. They tend to lift their leg on the corner of doorways, walls, furniture, you name it, with a little bit of a sprinkle. That behavior can actually set up a habit that becomes a very bad habit. So when you first bring a dog into your house, you do not want to give them unlimited freedom. You want to keep them on leash, or at least have them walking around the house with a leash on them, so you can very quickly get them outside if they start going through the telltale body postures that tell you they're about to do their business on your Oriental rug. So we all, having dogs, know some of those telltale signs. You need to be observant. You need to be in a position where you are watching your new house guest. If you see the dog going through those telltales, you are going to take that dog outside through the same door if possible. So you want to establish a routine. You want to establish a right and a wrong. So if you have a fenced yard, great. The same doorway into that fenced yard, the dog goes out. You want to watch them. And the second they finish doing their business out there, you want to praise, praise, praise. You don't want to interrupt them midstream, because then they may not eliminate completely, and you're going to bring them back in the house, and they're going to need to go again pretty soon. So with all housebreaking cases, if there is a change in the pattern, so you have a dog that has been absolutely wonderful in the house, has only had a couple accidents in a very long period of time, and suddenly something changes, that's when you want to talk to your veterinarian. Many times a change in housebreaking issues is a huge red flag that something is going on with your dog's health. That was our first sign that our last Greyhound was having some health issues. Is she lifted her head from her food bowl, walked to the middle of the living room, squatted, and peed right in front of me. So that was a huge red flag with me, and turned out she had some serious health issues going on. So definitely want to preface that with regard to those housebreaking issues, check in with a vet if you think it's something out of the ordinary. The other thing I want to highlight with regard to housebreaking issues is a good cleaner. So, and I don't mean a person, I don't mean a Mary Maids, I mean an enzyme-based cleaning solvent. So, Nature's Miracle is something that I live by, and I have in gallons in my house. Every time I talk to somebody about housebreaking issues, that is the first tool in the toolbox. So if you have a repeat offender, if you have a dog that has had housebreaking issues, if you are a foster family that has multiple dogs coming through your household, you want to have Nature's Miracle. And the instructions on the bottle need to be followed. Chewing and counter surfing. Going to talk a little bit about this. Counter surfing, first and foremost, is a behavior that obviously is self-rewarding. Greyhounds are tall doggies who can reach the counter without even jumping up on their hind legs. Management is key. You do not want to leave food out on the counter, especially if you have a new Greyhound coming into your household. You also don't want to have a garbage can sitting out with food items or other smelly, wonderful items in them. So a lidded garbage can, pushing those food items back from the edges of counters, putting things away, all incredibly important when it comes to keeping your dog from counter surfing. As I mentioned before, greyhounds tend to be very sensitive dogs. If you catch your dog in the act of trying to get up on the counter, snooping around a little too much at the dinner table while you're eating, a firm no and an alternate behavior like, hey, go lie down, is really important when it comes to that. Chewing is a behavior that is mostly a puppy issue. Obviously, we're getting greyhounds that are not puppies. If they are chewing, very often it's out of boredom, or it is due to separation anxiety or some other kind of anxiety. What you want to do with chewing is you always want to give an acceptable alternative. So chewy types of toys that are meant for avid chewers, and make them super, super rewarding. You want to be able to catch your dog in the act. So if you do have a chewer, if you have a chewing issue going on, again, just like with housebreaking, you don't want to give that dog full range of your house where they can chew on the furniture and the coffee table and your shoes, etc. Management is huge when it comes to chewing. There are chewing deterrents that you can spray on common items to try to deter your dog from chewing. But generally speaking, you just need to keep those items away from the dog, or keep the dog away from those items, and give some things that they can chew on. Last of these behaviors I want to talk about now, because I know I want to keep to a decent schedule, is resource guarding. So resource guarding can be a very dangerous behavior. It is a common behavior in all dogs. And resource guarding can take on the following types of items. Dogs can guard where they sleep, their space. So that would be their crate, their dog bed, and if they're allowed on the furniture, the furniture. Resource guarding can just be about food. So high reward treats like pig's ears, like rawhide types of chewy things, bones, those types of things are probably the most commonly guarded items. If you have a resource guarding issue, if you have a dog that is a guarder of food, you're going to want to manage that to keep everybody safe. You're going to want to feed your dog or only provide those types of high value treats while they are crated or in some kind of a separate area. Where most problems occur is when there are multiple dogs in a household, or dogs and small children are sharing a space, and a very high value food item is out there. That is when most types of bites occur. So you have to watch that very, very carefully. Toys are another item that some dogs will resource guard over. Most dogs can kind of work out that kind of issue if they're given enough space and if they are given some good guidelines as to what toys they can play with. A lot of dogs will play tug with each other eventually. And then probably the most dangerous form of resource guarding is when dogs decide they are going to resource guard their people. And that is when a dog becomes a real issue. I have my little doggy here trying to get my attention. Again, it is not a huge issue for most greyhounds to resource guard their people. With greyhounds, it is typically a furniture, a space resource guarding, and high value food items. Anybody who is having that kind of issue should absolutely talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to give some tips or pointers privately after this is all done. We can start a dialogue by email, by text, by phone, because that is definitely a serious one that has to be dealt with quickly. So I'm just going to go over sort of very quickly what, if you are working with a dog trainer to modify behavior, it really comes down to 5 parts, which you should be able to see on the screen. So the first thing is you've got to do a little bit of detective work, and you have to understand why is the behavior occurring. In a lot of cases, you may be guessing, but understanding the why is a very important part of behavior modification. The second part is finding an acceptable alternative behavior. So for example, chewing. If a dog is chewing, you're going to want to know, well, why are they chewing? Is it a puppy that's teething? Is it a dog that's going through some separation anxiety and they're chewing to soothe themselves? You need to find an acceptable way to get that dog's chewing out. They're still going to want to chew to soothe themselves, but you need to give them acceptable alternatives to chew than your shoes and your coffee table. Next thing you're going to focus on is management. If your dog is chewing, they need to be kept in a crate, in a baby gated area. They may need to wear a muzzle, etc. You don't want that dog being having that chewing behavior reinforced and to become a habit. So it needs to be managed. Consequences. So again, when people hear consequences, they often think about punishment. There is acceptable punishment even among positive reinforcement-based training. Typically, what a consequence is going to be, or what a punishment is going to be removal of a desired object. So if a dog is seeking attention, removal of your attention is actually an appropriate punishment or consequence. And then the last, as I mentioned before in my golden rules, is consistency. You have to be consistent, both you individually, but also everybody else who lives in your household has to be training the dog and treating the dog in a consistent manner. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about management. I've touched on it quite a bit in some of my examples, but we're just going to run down through some of these examples and the why of management. So first I'll talk about why. So management, generally it keeps the peace. It keeps bigger problems from happening, whether it's property damage, messes, injury or harm to people or other animals in the household. Management prevents your dog from forming bad habits. And bottom line, management avoids your dog getting rewarded for those undesirable behaviors. once that dog starts getting reward, often self-reward for certain behaviors, it gets harder and harder and harder to eliminate that behavior. So some common management tools that we use, both our foster families use, and most people who have had greyhounds in their houses. And a lot of these things will also relate to other non-greyhounds. So crates, gates, and spaces are a great way to prevent a lot of problem behaviors. Fences and leashes are management tools. They are absolutely management tools. Muzzles. The beauty of adopting an ex-racer is that most of them have already become conditioned to wear a muzzle. So a lot of people get very upset when they see dogs with muzzles on, and they think, oh my gosh, it's cruel, or they think that that means that the dog is aggressive. The reality is it doesn't really bother the greyhound. They're used to it. And if it prevents something like injury to another animal or chewing of your antique piece of furniture, then a muzzle is a great tool to use. Containment of your stuff is management. So managing the environment. If you have stuff all over your house that your dog can get into and create problems, then that is just, it's inviting damage and destruction and problems. I went to a house once where the people had just recently adopted a greyhound, and they said, oh gosh, he's chewing up all of our stuff. He chewed up the TV remote. He is getting into food in the kitchen. He's all into everything. And I went into their house and I realized they had no cabinet doors on any of their cabinets in their kitchen. So they had cloth curtains hanging down, and they had all of their food at nose height. So, you know, I don't know many dogs that would be able to go into that kitchen and not pull the box of Fruit Loops out of the cabinet and eat it. So containment of your stuff is a very easy management tool that is going to prevent a lot of problems. And then proper cleaning of waste, both inside and out, is a really important management tool. I already talked about Nature's Miracle, which I can't praise enough, but also just out in your yard. If you have a fenced yard, you want to be cleaning up the mess often to prevent spread of disease, etc. Resources. Tap in to your amazing network of Greyhound Options volunteers. Everybody who's on this call, everybody who you've dealt with from your placement rep to your foster families are all incredibly valuable resources. Don't hesitate to call, to text, to email any of the people. The beauty of working through a rescue is that we're all here for the benefit of the dogs, and we all volunteer our time to make sure that these placements are successful. So don't hesitate to ask or talk to us if you're having a problem. If you need to hire a dog trainer, make sure that it's a Greyhound experienced positive dog trainer. And then a book that I cannot praise too much is Adopting the Racing Greyhound by Cynthia Brannigan. If you don't own it, order it. And now we are on to the question portion. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so that I can have a better visibility. Otherwise, what do you think, Lisa or Sarah? Should I leave this background slide up or should I ditch it?
You can stop your share.
All right.
We are recording and we'll make the recording available. So those resources and information and stuff will be accessible to people if they need that after the fact.
Perfect. Sorry, I got a little long-winded, but lots of stuff to cover.
I think we have our next like 4 learn and greets all planned out. We'll just keep you on.
I know, right?
So
Lisa, feel free to jump in. I know that we do have some questions in the chat that we can either pose to Kim as a whole group, or we can go into the breakout rooms now. Whatever you think might be best, Lisa.
Yeah, we still have a few minutes, so why don't we, some of the questions several people might be interested in, so why don't we touch on a couple.
Couple real common ones.
Yeah, so we'll stay here and pose the questions that were asked, and then we will go into breakout rooms. Sarah will again give us the option for people who want to join Kim's breakout room so we can continue more personal conversations. Right now, we're going to still keep the questions from the chat box, but when we get to the greet portion, people can unmute themselves and turn on their videos, so we'll be able to have those conversations. And again, there'll be a separate choice for folks who just want to have a general conversation. There'll be a social breakout room as well. So in terms of some of the questions, Kim, we're getting, people are commenting that their greyhounds don't necessarily like to go for walks in their neighborhood. They'll look to go back home, want to hop in the car and try to get back home. Do you have any suggestions what the issue might be?
Yeah, so that is likely some kind of anxiety that, you know, we really never know what dogs have gone through before they come to us. You know, we can guess, but it doesn't take much for a negative experience to create anxiety in any dog. So I've only met one dog in my entire life that really, truly was so traumatized by walks that she was just absolutely terrified of everything to do with leashes, everything to do with leaving the house. And yet we were able to get her through that to where she willingly and joyfully started going for walks in the neighborhood. It was not a greyhound. With regard to a greyhound, you're a leg up because these are dogs that are used to being leash walked. When they're at the track, there's no way around that. Those dogs are trained to be on leash and to be led to the racetrack. So they have to be led that way. What I would suggest is what I mentioned in one of my very first slides: food overcomes fear. So start bringing food right along, make it an incredibly, incredibly positive experience. So you want to lure your dog into any kind of behavior that they are hesitant of. You don't want to force ever. So greyhounds will do a thing that is, you know, there's always in any animal, including humans, there is fight, flight, or freeze as a response to any kind of stress. So I have encountered many greyhounds who will do any of the above. They will try to flee something that is scary to them. They will just freeze and no longer budge, in which case you are then lifting up and carrying a 75-pound greyhound if they decide they don't want to move. or, you know, that, so food, so let me just ask Jennifer, is your Greyhound food motivated? Is there some really yummy food, whether it's a spoonful of peanut butter, or whether it's a chunk of chicken or multiple little pieces of chicken to be feeding? If that will work, I would say try that first and foremost. And just start small. Start with, okay, out the door, up to the end of the driveway and down to the first telephone pole, and then let's walk back. And just start gradually pushing the threshold a little bit further and a little bit further, always keeping in mind to make it very, very positive. So that would be how I would deal with that.
Okay, and a sort of related question in terms of walking, but this time there's someone who has a Greyhound that doesn't like to walk on slippery floors. And I guess that's probably related to some sort of fear about that
Yes.
situation as well.
Yeah, and that is definitely a somewhat common behavior with a lot of Greyhounds. So that would be a twofold process. One would be trying to counter condition. So again, you're going to use food. You're going to use something very, very rewarding, and you're going to be super positive, and you're going to be calm, and you're going to try to lure the dog in baby steps onto that slippery floor. They have to learn that they're not going to wipe out and do a Bambi on the ice situation. And the probability is they're afraid of that slippery floor because that's happened. They've wiped out and they have hurt themselves. So you want to make sure that you are starting to counter condition that by getting them to just walk little bits across those slippery floors. Make sure that their nails are kept short. Those Greyhounds tend to when they get onto slippery floors, they tend to go up onto their nails. They tend to get off of the pads of their feet and onto their nails, and that makes it worse. That makes them more prone to slipping and falling. So you want to make sure those nails stay short. You want to make sure that they're not startled when they are on the slippery floor. And while all of that is going on, you're also going to want to manage. So I know some people who just gave it up altogether, and they have beautiful little runners going all of the places around their house where their Greyhound needs to go. So it really depends on your house, on how much hard floor, or tile or linoleum that you have, and what the what the whole household routine is. But I would suggest that start that dog, if they're very food motivated, put their elevated feeder in an area where they actually have to cross the lava floor. They have to actually go across that floor in order to get food. And walk them over very, very quietly and calmly with some really highly desirable food like chicken, and do that repeatedly until they realize, you know what, I'm doing this. This is okay. And it's going to take some time. It's going to be a process. So hopefully that answered that. The next one I see is sleep startle.
You know what? I'm just wondering now, it is noon. So maybe this is a good time to transition into our break rooms. So Sarah can set
Give
them up
me
for us. Yep, we'll give her a
30
minute.
seconds
Yeah,
and
sure,
I
and-
will have
yep,
it
and-
going for you.
Yeah, and before we do that, before we transition, I would first just like to thank our speaker, Kim, so much for all of this, really helpful information. We, appreciate this very, very much.
Yeah,
I'd
you're
also like to thank our host and co-hosts, especially Sarah, for helping with all of this Zoom technology that most of us weren't real familiar with. So we appreciate
No problem.
that. And then, so Sarah is going to set up the break rooms and we'll be able to see them at the bottom of the screen. Is that correct?
There will be 2 rooms. One is going to be called Additional Questions for Kim, and one is just Social Hour, and they're self-select. So when you see those pop up, you'll be able to choose the one that you would like to go into.
And the social hour room will be hosted by Greyhound Options. Terry Bryant will be there. And we also believe, Sarah, that people can go from one room to the other.
Yeah, that was my question. Once people have gotten their fill of me, wanted to make sure they could bounce out of my group and go and join the fun social crew.
That they can do that. And we are not coming back together as a group. So when somebody has had enough fun, they will be able to leave and the breakout rooms will sort of end.
All right.
So the only other thing I just want to mention too, just as an FYI, please start looking for information soon about our next upcoming learn and greet. We have one we're planning now, hopefully will be out the end of March. And it will be, we're going to have a presenter from Greyhound Amber Alert, who can give us a lot of tips to keep our Greyhounds safe and has a lot of experience with helping people when the unthinkable happens and the Greyhound gets loose. So look for that information to come. So again, thank you all very, very much for joining and for some patience with us as we work through some of the, things.
And thanks to Lisa for all her hard work in putting this event together, for sure. Thank you, Lisa.